Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. Today we have Ken Berk, head coach of the Wyckoff YMCA Sharks. Ken, let's just jump right in. Can you tell us who you are and how you got started and where you are today?
Sure. Ken Berk. I'm the head coach of the Wyckoff YMCA Sharks here in New Jersey. Started coaching when I was 20 years old. So I'm 62, so just for a few years now.
It's a few.
And it was a long journey of doing just about every type of coaching you can imagine. I ended up here at Wyckoff after my daughter, when she was 10, joined the team. And I was sitting on the other side of the glass watching practice, had no intention of really coaching at that point. Again, I had been coaching high school for a while after I was done coaching college. And the head coach of the team kind of knocked on the window, knew who I was, and asked if I wanted to help out on deck. And like most people who just love the sport of swimming, helping someone learn how to swim was all I wanted to do. And fast track that forward. The head coach at that time decided that she no longer wanted to do it. And it kind of moved towards, do you want to be the head coach of the team? And I was absolutely, I love this team, and the experiences of working at a Y is so much different than working on the high school level or the collegiate level. So this has been a very rewarding experience for me, and something I look forward to continue to do.
Absolutely. It's funny how we get into swimming from whatever place that we come from, whether it be learn to swim or having kids who do it. And once we fall into it, it just seems like it's impossible to get back out. Not that anybody would ever want to, but it's funny how, things kind of roll forward the way they do. So that's great. So what would you say over the course of your coaching career so far? What are some of the achievements that you've seen the team accomplish? And what are some of the challenges that you've faced as a coach that you've overcome?
I think as a team, one of my biggest accomplishments is emboldening all of our coaching staff to be the best of themselves. I had been in other programs where you're kind of molded, and this is the only way you can coach and the only way you can get your information across. And although we do use the same terminology from 8 and unders all the way up through our teenage swimmers, I give each coach some latitude in the way they want to deliver that information. And that freedom, I really think, helps each age group coach kind of find their niche with that group of kids in the water. And extrapolate that forward, it has really worked well here. All of our age groups tend to accelerate pretty well through the program. And then when they finally get up to the upper age group level, we're all on the same page, kind of pulling that rope at the same pace, and it ends up doing a good job. I mean, for this year, through COVID, when we finally had a chance to actually swim in a real meet, because we only had one where we were able to swim against other athletes. I mean, the teenage group, when we went, they broke, I think, 16 team records. And that was quite remarkable, considering how difficult it was on them.
Congratulations.
Right? Yeah, it was great. Less difficult on the coaching staff as far as, delivering information, because there was less in the water, but really hard on the athlete to try to stay motivated when your other swimmer in your lane is 12 feet away from you, or all the way at the other end of the pool, where you're so used to that connection being in the pool. Being disconnected was pretty difficult this year.
Right. And it sounds like you guys are just continuing to make strides and doing the best with what you have, which is
we're trying
similar across the board for everybody right now. So you've said that you absolutely love coaching and that you've been doing it for a while now.
A few years.
What is your favorite part of the job? What do you like most about it?
That's a good one. Teaching. My primary profession was a teacher. Taught for close to 30 years. And so just teaching every little detail about swimming itself, not just the application in the water, but what swimming provides you as an athlete out of the water. And those type of connections that you get a chance to make, whether or not it's seeing the 8-year-old learn breaststroke kick for the first time, or the 18-year-old finally finding a way to apply pressure in the water where they distance per stroke is decreased and they're getting faster, and the light bulb went off in their head, and like it took them 10 years, but they got it, right? And the teaching aspect of swimming, I think, is something that gets overlooked when you start to just really hone in on set design and year microsets and you name it. And it's just become minutia of information. And you need to back away from that and remember that you need to teach them. And you need to continue to strive for that in the pool, and you'll be okay.
Right. So as far as the being a teacher nature of coaching, what skills do you think are the most important or the most valuable, either for yourself or just in general, to be able to help your swimmers learn and improve?
Your eyes, I think that for me personally, and it doesn't work this way for everybody, that having an idea of what you want to do that day in the pool is just an idea. And taking a look at what's actually happening during that practice session and being able to move away from something that might not be working that day, or seeing too many in the group having an issue with something that you didn't even want to address that day, but you can't overlook it. And so you stop it and you reboot and you continue to teach. And if you are new to this sport, I think that so many of us where we need to do 1 through 10 today, and we have to get to 10 because that's what I wrote down on my practice workout. And you get to 6 and the group is struggling, and you don't take that breath as a coach to say, okay, the next 4 items are not as important as fixing what I'm looking at right now. So I think your eyes are really important.
Okay, absolutely. I mean, I would agree. It sounds like adaptability and being able to recognize and respond to things in real time.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what do you think are some key factors in building a successful team beyond just the teaching and the adaptability? What about the group dynamic and actually going to meets and performing? What do you think are some key factors there?
I think organization
Okay.
is the first thing you need to have. And behind me right here is a whiteboard that seems fairly empty right now, but usually it's pretty full of information. So the organizational skills of a head coach are really important. That organization then kind of filters its way down to every age group coach below. Once you get to a meet, I just think you become more of a inspirer than a stroke mechanic at that point. Right. I've learned a long time ago, there's no reason to tell somebody of an error in the middle of a meet that they are not able to correct. So then all they do is think of the issue in the next event, and it kind of spirals out of control. So I'll keep notes. I have a little book that I take with me to a meet, and I'll just keep notes on each athlete, and then we'll talk about it at another time. And so the meet itself is really the joy of swimming for most athletes and coaches too. Right. So they should go to that meet with the idea of it's time to have some fun and put into action the things that you've done in practice.
Right. Okay. So yeah, definitely not a time to be doing anything new. More of a time to be pulling out everything that they've done so far.
Yeah, one of the things that we talk about a lot are leaving your expectations at home. Those goals and expectations are practice, and you do those things in practice to achieve what you want to do in a meet. And so bringing those things with you behind the block have a tendency to lock up an athlete and not get to where they need to go.
Right.
So just leave it alone and get up on the block. And I kind of tell them all the time, remember when you were 8 and you were trying to get that first ribbon, all you wanted to do was get to the wall. All right. So get up on the block and just be 8 years old and go swim. You know how to do it.
That's a really good point. You know how to do it, you know, and I think that speaks a lot to the coaching style that you've told me about so far, really educating them during practice so that by the time they get to that block, all they need to do is swim. Everything else has kind of been coded into muscle memory. They know how to do it.
Absolutely. So, the old adage of practice makes perfect. Well, perfect practice makes perfect. And there's no such thing as a perfect practice. So you're really trying to treat them like human beings. They're not robots.
Right.
And the more we look at an athlete and say, whatever frailty they have, it's okay. And let's work on that emotional end of it so that they can experience the physical end of it because they're ready to do it. And, we've brought in sports nutritionists and we've brought in sports psychologists and Olympians and you name it into the program to talk to everybody. And the biggest thing for me has always been, and I call it the triangle of swimming, which is parent, coach, athlete. And no matter which way you spin that triangle, it's still pretty strong, right? So you pull one of those away and it seems to fall apart a little bit. So if everybody's on the same page and everybody is thinking of the same thing, it usually tends to come out in a good performance.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny that you should mention the practice makes perfect because something that we say is practice makes permanent.
That's true.
The fact that doesn't matter if you're doing it perfectly, it matters what you're doing and why, because whatever you do over and over again is the thing that you're going to be able to do when it counts. So it sounds like your philosophy is very similar to what we've been teaching as well.
It's one of the things I like about your program, believe it or not. When my daughter, who's now 26, swam, I think she was 12, and I brought her to one of an instructor, and they gave us the booklet at that point and everything else because it was a very clear method and message of that you need to do things in steps in order to get better. And 1,000 strokes wrong takes 5,000 strokes to fix. So you better off get it right in the beginning. And that's why it's the hardest job, believe it or not, is the young age group coach, because that's where the foundation is set. You get up to be 13 and 14 years old and performing a skill incorrectly, it's really hard to fix.
Not impossible, but
not impossible, but takes a lot of focus and concentration on both athlete and coach.
Absolutely. So you've had a great career so far and you've taken a lot of steps yourself. Is there any advice that you would give to new coaches who want to follow in your footsteps?
Patience, right? Sometimes, a coach is as competitive as can be. And most coaches that I know, they want their athletes to succeed at the highest level, not for personal accolades, but because they're just so competitive. And I really think that it takes a new coach time to learn patience, time to understand that a season is not 1 year. I have this thing that I tell young parents of younger children. How long, they're 8 years old, and I'll say, how long is your season? And they'll say, 1 year. And I'll say, no, your season's 10 years because you have 10 more years to go. Don't look at it as that you have to learn everything at this specific instance. Don't look at it that you have to achieve everything right now. You have to look at it in the long term. And if you look at things as a coach in the long term, one, there's less pressure. Two, you have more patience. And three, the athlete themselves understands that it doesn't necessarily have to happen instantaneously for them.
Right. And that instantaneous drive, you know, in my experience working with a lot of families and a lot of swimmers, that is one of the biggest challenges that they bring to us, and that they bring up, is the fact that the swimmer feels that every race is the most important race of their lives. And if they don't make gains, drop time, break records, then there's been some sort of failure. And the wisdom that I've seen given over and over again is progress is the goal. Personal progress is the thing that we should be striving for, because that's how we continue to develop as a swimmer and as a person.
Well, you know, the time on the clock doesn't necessarily say the whole truth, right? So you can get better and faster just because you've grown, and yet your technical aspect of swimming has not improved. Or you can not get better on the clock, but have every little thing work better that you've done in practice, which is preparing you for that time that it all comes together. So I know we're a driven society, right? And this sport is a driven sport. It's driven by the athlete. It's driven by information that's given at home. It's driven by coaches on deck. It's a driven sport. But it needs to have the big picture. And the biggest picture of all to me is that it doesn't necessarily happen in a blink. All right. It happens over time. And if you're okay with the process of getting better, okay, understanding, I saw this quote the other day that popcorn all pops at a different rate, right? But it usually all pops. All right. So if we get that understanding that just because my teammate might have improved quicker than I did, or I did better last year than this year, doesn't mean you're not going to pop. All right. So patience.
Patience. It all comes back to patience, which I think is a very good thing to underline, because everybody can benefit from it. Okay, so you have actually had an opportunity to take a tour through our FM Fast Track suite of tools on our website. What did you think of it, and what tools would you say are the ones that you would find yourself using the most frequently with your own swimmers?
Well, I don't want to call them cartoon characters because they're really not, right?
The avatars.
There you go. They're really well done.
Thank you.
And they're so well done that I think any age group can look at it and really get an understanding of where the pressure should be applied.
Right.
And I think moving forward, I'm going to encourage the majority of our athletes to make sure they get a look at it. Right. And the reason is we talk about it all the time. You know, what's funny is that we find our pressure in the pool at different rates, and, you know, coaches talk about distance per stroke all the time. And I've known about pressure fields since I swam, but lucky enough to find it because no one taught it. Right. And the one thing that I took, especially from John's like last little thing I saw on Fina, is when you talk about someone having more talent than somebody else, and it is true, someone could be more athletic than somebody else. I mean, obviously, we know that across every sport, there's better athletes, but it doesn't mean that you can't learn and find ways to get better. And I think those avatars really put it in perspective and visually of what they need to do. But for me, the tools of splits and being able to generate that, I used to do it by hand, and I would figure it out and sit down and be like, okay, if you need to go this time and you need to maximize your energy and you should be doing X, Y, Z. And it took hours upon hours. And then every time you would get better, you would have to redo it. Right. So being able to just jump in that
Yeah.
is huge. It's a huge time saver. And it's something the athlete can also play around with when they start working on their goals. What do I need to do to achieve this goal? Well, if I need to repeat 50s at this pace, I need to know what those 50s are. And this, what we're looking at right now, this does a great job of that.
There we go.
Yep.
So when we're talking about the FM Fast Track, we're talking about the time splits. We did 100 freestyle for short course yards, 45 seconds, and this gives us a good split. And you can see that we want them to go faster in the first, a little bit slower, and then finish out strong.
Yeah, I mean, we use something, obviously this, but I'll just look at the last meet we were at, and a 200 breaststroker was just too fast in the first 25. And usually always too fast in the first 25. Has a lot of top end speed. And both the coaches on deck were like, listen, you have to lose the first 25. You have to be last at the wall. All right. Knowing that last at the wall was still going to be pretty fast, right, but it would more fit into those splits that we were looking at right there in a way. Mm-hmm. And last to the wall, 2-second drop in a 200 breaststroke. So the tools are awesome.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. So I have one more question for you to close this out. And that is, in your opinion, what is more important, passion or performance?
Okay, let's clarify this just for a second. Are we talking practice or racing?
Both.
I'm going to go with passion.
Okay.
Right? And the reason I'll go with passion is because without passion, you have no performance. All right. The sport requires a tremendous amount of sacrifice, and finding your passion in the pool gives you that feeling, that lightness in the water. It gives you that opportunity to put yourself out there, all right, and not to worry about the outcome as much, because when you worry about failure, you tend to fail. All right. So that's why I'll go back to saying, remember I said in the beginning, race like you're 8 years old, right? Because they had passion. They didn't even understand what performance was. They understood that I love what I do, and I'm going to go and practice, and I'm going to just love what I do. And that's passion. And I'm going to get on a block and love what I do. And that's passion. And so I think passion, a high level of it, don't lose it as you get older, as we become more and more narrow focused on the time. Mm-hmm. Find that passion that started you in the sport and kept you in the sport for all these years. And when you do that, you go back to that passion, you'll get faster.
I like it. Well, thank you so much for your wisdom and for taking your time to have a chat with me today. Is there any last bit of wisdom or information that you'd like to share with us before we close out?
Yes.
Yes.
This has been a hard year on families, athletes, coaches, club teams, Y teams, you name it. But the one thing that I've watched is that the swimmers across the state of New Jersey, and I'm sure across this country, have found a way to deal with it and make themselves better through it. So many people were, it's not afraid, but hesitant to put themselves out there during COVID, all right, or find an excuse not to better themselves as a human being. And I find that the swimming community has gone beyond and put themselves out there and made themselves into better human beings, and learning how to put their hand across the lane more to a teammate and encourage them more. And I'm really proud of the athletes on this team, as I am the athletes across this country.
Me too. I think it has been The word that keeps coming out is unprecedented, which is honestly an understatement. But I agree absolutely that the strides that we've made as a community and the efforts that we've put into as a sport to find water and make whatever use of it we can has been truly inspiring.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you again for joining me. I hope we have an opportunity to talk again soon.
It'll be nice.
All right. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
All right. Bye bye.